Boy, she really didn't like talking to authority figures. Malcolm was one thing. Malcolm was like a big brother. But Oliver was different. I might be able to help you, Oliver said, if I had something to trade. The problem is, what does Brandon want that you or Shane can give, other than the obvious? Oliver looked thoughtful, and tapped his lips with a fingertip. You are a very bright girl, Claire, or so Eve tells me. Walderville can use bright girls. We might be able to bypass Brandon altogether, perhaps, and find a way to make a deal with someone else. Which was pretty much exactly what they'd already talked about, all without the Oliver part. Claire tried not to look horribly guilty and transparent. Who? She asked. It was a reasonable question. Oliver smiled and his dark eye was sharp and cool. Claire, do you really expect me to tell you? The more you know about this town, the less safety there is for you. Do you understand that? I've had to create my own peace here, and it only works because I know exactly what I'm doing, and how far I can go. I'm afraid your first mistake might be your last. Her mouth wasn't dry anymore. It was mummified. She tried to swallow, but nothing but a dry click at the back of her throat. She hastily flicked up her teeth and sipped it, tasting nothing but glad of the moisture. I wasn't going to don't. He cut her off, and his voice wasn't so kind this time. Why else would you be here today? And you know Brandon is likely to show up any time after dark. You want to make a deal with him to save Shane. That much is obvious. Well, it wasn't why she was here. But still, he tried to look guilty about that too. Just in case. It must have worked because Oliver sat back in his chair looking more relaxed. You're clever, he said. So is Shane, but don't let it go to your heads. Let me help. She nodded, not trusting her voice not to quiver or break, or, worse, betray how relieved she was. That's settled then, Oliver said. Let me talk to Brandon and a few others, and see what I can do to make this problem go away. Thanks, she said faintly. Oliver got up and left, looking like any skinny ex-hippie who hadn't quite let go of the good old days. Inoffensive, ineffective maybe. She couldn't rely on adults. Not for this. Not in Morgan, though. She opened up the laptop, maximized the browser window, and went back to work. Like always, the time slipped away. When she looked up next, it was night outside the windows, when the crowd in the coffee shop had switched over from studious to chatting. Eve was busy at the bar, talking and smiling and generally being about as cheerful as a goth chick could be. She went quiet, though, when Brandon slouched in from the back room and took his accustomed seat at the table in the darkest corner. Oliver brought him some kind of drink. God, she hoped it wasn't blood or anything, and sat down to have some intense and quiet conversation. Claire tried to look like she wasn't there. She and Eve exchanged a few glances between customers at the bar. Putting together the book Claire had learned during the long research marathon was work for experts, not 16-year-olds, nearly 17, wannabes. She could put something together, but to her vast disappointment, anybody with an eye for rare books could spot a fake pretty easily, unless it was expertly done. She suspected that her leatherworking and bookbinding skills needed work, all of which brought her back to square one. Shane gets bitten. Not acceptable. A line in one of the dozens of windows she'd opened caught her eye. Nearly anything can be created for the movies, including reproductions of ancient books, because the reproduction only has the full one of the seen senses. Vision. She didn't have time, or cash, to get some Hollywood prop house to make a book for her, but it gave her an idea. A really good idea. Or a really bad one, if it didn't work. Nearly anything can be created for the movies. She didn't need the book. She just needed a picture. By the time midnight rolled around, and Common Grounds ushered the last caffeine addict out into the night, Claire was reasonably sure she could pull it off, and she was too tired to care if she couldn't. She backed to the laptop and leaned her head on her hand, watching while Eve cleaned up cups and glasses, loaded the dishwasher, chatted with Oliver, and deliberately ignored the dark shadow sitting in the corner. Brandon hadn't taken off after his walking snacks. Instead, he kept sitting there, nursing a fresh cup of whatever it was he was drinking, smiling that cruel, weird little smile at Eve, and Claire, and Eve. Oliver dried ceramic cups. Had been watching the watcher. Brandon, he said, and tossed the towel across his shoulder as he began slotting cups into their bowl racks. Closing time. You didn't even call last rounds, old man, Brandon said and turned that smile on Oliver, where it died fast. After a moment of silence, Brandon stood up to stalk away. Wait, Oliver said very quietly. Cup. Brandon looked at him in utter disbelief, then picked up the cup, disposable paper, and dumped it in the trash can. First time he'd bust his own table in a few dozen years, Clara guessed. If ever. She hid a nervous grin, because he didn't seem like the kind of guy, much less Vab, who'd appreciate her sense of humor. Anything else? Brandon asked acidly, not as if he actually cared. Actually, yes. If you wouldn't mind, I'd like the ladies to leave first. Even in the shadows, Claire saw the gleam of sharp teeth when Brandon silently opened his mouth, flashing his fangs, showing off. Oliver didn't seem impressed. If you wouldn't mind, he repeated. Brandon shrugged and leaned against the wall, arms folded. He was wearing a black leather jacket that drank in light and black knit skirt. A dark jeans, dressed to kill, Claire thought, and wished she had it. I'll wait, he said. But they don't need to worry about me, old man. The boy made a deal. I'll stick to it. That's what I'm worried about, Oliver said. Eve, Claire, get home safe. Go. Eve slammed the door to the dishwasher and turned it on. She grabbed her purse from behind the counter and ducked out to take Claire's hand and pull her toward the door. She flipped the front sign from open to close and unlocked the door to let Claire out. She locked it back behind them with a set of keys and hustled Claire quickly to the car. Which time in the warm glow of the streetlight. The street looked deserted. Wind whipped trash and dust into clattering ghosts, and the blinking red spotlights danced and swayed along. Eve unlocked the car in record time and both of them slammed down the locks once they were inside. Eve started up the caddy and motored away from the curb. Only then did she sigh a little in relief. And then she gasped, because another car turned the corner and whipped past them in a black blur, stopping at the curb where they'd been parked. What the hell? Eve blurted and slowed down. Claire turned to look back. It's a limo, she said. She didn't even think Morganville had a limo. But then she thought about funeral homes and funerals, and got chills. For all she knew, maybe Morganville had more limos than any city in Texas. This one wasn't part of the procession, though. It was big and black, and gleamed like the finish on a cockroach. And as the caddy inched along, Claire saw a uniformed driver get out and walk around to the back. Who is it? Eve asked. Can you see? The driver handed out a woman, small, not much taller than Claire herself, she guessed, pale, with a hair that glowed white or blonde in the streetlights. They were too far for Claire to get a really good look, but she thought the woman looked sad and cold. She's not very tall, white hair and kind of elegant. Nobody I've met. Most of the vamps don't mingle with the little people, kind of like the Hiltons don't stop at shop at Walmart. Claire snorted. As Eve turned the corner, she saw the woman standing in front of the door of Common Grounds, and saw Oliver opening it for her. No sign of Brandon. She wondered if Oliver had already sent him out, or if he was making the vamp give them a head start. How does Oliver do this? She asked. I mean, why don't they just kill him? I wish I knew. He's got balls of platinum, for one thing, he said, passing a streetlight strobe across her face. You saw how he did Brandon back there, dissing him? Unbelievable. Anybody else would be dead by dawn. Oliver just gets away with it. Which made Claire even more curious about the why, or at least the how. If Oliver could get away with it, maybe other people could too. Then again, maybe the people already tried, and then enough was over to others. Claire turned back, face forward, lost in thought, as Eve sped through the silent, watching streets for home. A police car prowled the side street, but somehow in Morganville she thought they weren't looking so much for criminals as potential victims. At first she thought she was so tired she was imagining things. That happened when you didn't sleep. You saw ghosts in mirrors and spooky faces at the window. But then she saw something moving fast, though. The glow of a streetlight, something pale. They're following. Eve said, damn. Brandon? Claire tried to scan the sides of the street, but Eve pressed the gas and went faster. Not Brandon. Then again, he doesn't have to get his fangs dirty personally. 50 feet ahead, someone steps in front of the car. Claire and Eve screamed, and Eve stands on the brakes. Claire pushed forward against the seatbelt, which snapped tight and grabbed so hard that she just knew she was going to pass out from the pain, as the acid burn on her back rubbed against the seat. But the pain flashed away, buried by fear, because the car was fishtailing to a stop on the dark street, and there was a vampire standing there, resting its hands on the hood, grinning, with way too many teeth. Claire, if you don't look at him, don't look. Too late. Claire had, and she felt something going soft in her head. The fear went away. So did all her good sense. She reached for the lock on the door, but Eve lunged across and grabbed her arm. "No!" she screamed, and held on as she slammed the car into reverse and burned rubber backward. She didn't get far. Another vampire stepped out, blocking the street. This one was tall, ugly, and old. Same number of gleaming teeth. Oh God. Claire kept fumbling for the lock on the door. Eve muttered something that would have definitely gotten Claire grounded at home. Hit the brakes. Again, and said, "Claire, honey, this is going to hurt." And then she pushed Claire forward and slapped her on the burn. Hard. Claire screeched loud enough to deafen dogs 3 countries away. Nearly fainted. And quit trying to get out of the car. Even the 2 vampires outside the car, who were all of a sudden right there at the doors, flinched and stepped back. Eve gunned the engine. Claire, half fainting from the red-hot throbbing agony in her back, heard noise like iron nails on the chalkboard. But then it stopped, and they were moving, driving, flying through the night. Claire? Claire? Eve was shaking her by the other shoulder, the one that didn't feel like she'd taken another acid bath. "Oh God, I'm sorry. It was going to get you to open the door, and I couldn't. I'm sorry." Panic was still hardwired through her veins, but Claire managed to nod in a weak, sick smile. She understood. She'd always wondered how in the hell anybody could be stupid enough to open up a door to the scary bad things in the movies. But now she knew. She absolutely knew. Sometimes you just didn't have a choice. He was gasping for breath and crying fiercely in between. "I hate this," she said, and slammed her hand into the hard plastic steering wheel, over and over. "I hate this town. I hate them." Claire got that too. She was starting to really hate them too.